Welcome to our overview of the federal supplement not supplant requirement as it applies to federal education programs authorized under the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. During this presentation, we will discuss the resources that are available for reference and the purpose of the supplement not supplant requirement, as well as how to determine what documentation standard to apply. Is this traditional SNS, or is the Title I Part A SNS methodology being used? We will also discuss monitoring and how to document the connection between the SNS methodology and the general ledger, as well as some common issues that we find when validating compliance with the SNS requirement. We will also cover some examples. First, let's go over some of the resources that are available. In June of 2019, the U.S. Department of Education issued a non-regulatory informational document that provided guidance in several key areas and helped to clarify some of the logistical issues that have been raised as local education agencies, or LEAs, implemented the Every Student Succeeds Act. The Texas Education Agency used this guidance document to revise its Supplement Not Supplant Handbook, which is available on the agency's website. The revised handbook provides a quick reference chart on pages 2 and 3 that lists the federal education programs and the corresponding statutory citation for each program's Supplement Not Supplant provision. The chart also lists the specific wording of each Supplement Not Supplant provision. It's a little different for each program, and those differences can have a big impact. For example, some programs, like Title II Part A, are only required to supplement non-federal funds, while funds under Title III Part A are required to supplement both federal and non-federal funds. We have also clarified in our handbook that the ESSER statute has no supplement not supplant provision. Supplement not supplant is a term that we use a lot, and we sometimes forget in these presentations that it is important to cover the basic purpose of the provision in statute. The purpose of the supplement not supplant provision is to help ensure that federal grant funds are expended to benefit the intended population, not diverted to cover expenses that the LEA would have paid out of other funds in the event that the federal program funds were not available. Most federal programs with a supplement not supplant provision still use traditional documentation. This means that the LEA must have documentation that shows that the program activities expand, enhance, or extend the required activities. This traditional documentation looks at the activities that are paid with state and local funds as if those were the base layer of a cake. Federal program activities that are required to supplement the state and local activities are like the icing on the cake. Program participants receive the cake as well as the icing. We wouldn't expect the icing to replace the cake. Programs like Title III Part A, which are required to supplement federal as well as non-federal funds, would be like cherries on top of the icing, which is on top of the cake. When the Every Student Succeeds Act introduced the Supplement Not Supplant methodology as a way to document compliance with the SNS provision for Title I Part A and Title I School Improvement, it required something of a paradigm shift. The Supplement Not Supplant requirement did not go away, but for Title I Part A and Title I School Improvement, the focus of the documentation moved away from the activity level, where it had always been, and where it remains for those programs that use traditional ways of documenting supplement not supplant requirements. For Title I Part A and Title I School Improvement, once the LEA has documented how it allocates its state and local funds to campuses, any Title I Part A or Title I School Improvement funds that are allocated to those campuses are considered to be supplemental. The Supplement Not Supplant Handbook discusses both the traditional SNS documentation in Section A and the Title I Part A methodology documentation in Section B. Programs that use the traditional Supplement Not Supplant documentation include Title I Part C, Title I Part D Subpart 1, Title II Part A, Title III Part A, Title IV Part A, Title IV Part B, the Rural and Low-Income School Program, IDEA, Perkins, and the McKinney-Vento Program. Programs that are covered by the Supplement Not Supplant methodology are Title I Part A and Title I School Improvement. We will come back to the Supplement Not Supplant methodology documentation in a few minutes. But first, let's review the traditional Supplement Not Supplant documentation requirement, which is still in place for most federal programs that have a Supplement Not Supplant provision. So just to recap, the programs that use traditional Supplement Not Supplant documentation are Title I Part C, Title I Part D Subpart 1, Title II Part A, Title III Part A, Title IV Part A, Title IV Part B, the Rural and Low-Income Schools Program, IDEA, Perkins, and the McKinney-Vento Program. For these programs, the traditional Supplement Not Supplant documentation is looking at the service or activity level. The state and LEAs can use these program funds only to supplement and not to supplant the services or activities provided with non-federal sources. Please note that because of the way the statute is written, Title III Part A and the Rural and Low-Income Schools Program must also be supplemental to other federal funds. There is an additional Supplement Not Supplant provision for the rural and low-income schools and the small rural school achievement funds. If the activity is one that would ordinarily be covered with other federal, state, or local funds, for example, in most cases, the standard textbook purchases would ordinarily be covered with state or local funds. In this case, the LEA would have to rebut a presumption of supplanting through written contemporaneous documentation, for example, state or local legislative action, budget information, school board minutes, or other materials, that it would not be able to fund the particular activity in the absence of the RLIS or the SRSA funds. If you've heard us talk about Supplement Not Supplant before, you've probably heard us talk about the traditional presumptions of supplanting. An auditor will presume that supplanting occurs if the LEA has used federal funds to provide services or activities that are required by state or local law, to provide the same services or activities as those provided in the prior school year with state or local funds, or to provide the same services or activities in federal and non-federal programs. It is possible to rebut the presumptions of supplanting, but the responsibility for providing the documentation for this falls entirely on the LEA. Examples of appropriate documentation might be documentation of a rescission of funds or a budget reduction, or documentation that the fund source previously used for an activity or service is no longer available. The key is that the documentation must be written and it must be contemporaneous, which is a $10 word for saying that the documentation must be from the time of the event, not created after the fact. There are some standard questions the LEA should ask when making supplement not supplant determinations. The first question should always be, what program is involved? If it's a program that uses traditional supplement not supplant documentation, the LEA should then ask the following questions. Is the activity or service required by state or local law? Did the LEA provide this activity or service in the prior year? Did the LEA previously use non-federal funds to provide this activity or service? Is the activity or service provided with federal funds to some recipients and with state and local funds to other recipients? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, the LEA should consider whether it may need to rebut a presumption of supplanting or perhaps use a different fund source. So let's take a sample question and walk through this process together. In this example, an LEA wants to purchase 25 new security cameras. From a supplement not supplant perspective, is it all right to use Title IV funds for this? So what question should you always ask first? What program is involved? So what program is involved here? We're talking about Title IV Part A funds. So by confirming to ourselves that we are dealing with Title IV Part A funds, we know that we're dealing with traditional supplement not supplant documentation. And we know what our next questions should be. Is this a state or local requirement? Did the LEA conduct the activity last year and did state and local funds pay for it? Did the LEA use Title IV funds for cameras at some campuses and state and local funds at other campuses? Now, at our LEA, we may not know the answers to all of these questions right at the moment, but it isn't unusual to start with the basic question and then have to do a little digging to find out all of the answers we need in order to make the appropriate decision. Also, the answers to these questions are very LEA specific, which is why our standard answer to this type of question in a public setting is it depends. If the LEA previously purchased security cameras with state or local funds, this could be a supplant. To rebut the presumption of supplant, the LEA must document that the state or local funds are no longer available. Okay, now we're going to take time out for you to check what you know about supplement not supplant. So question 1, is it allowable for Title II Part A funds to be used for the reading academies? So we'll give you a hint. What's the first question you should ask? What program is involved? So what program is involved in this particular question? Title II Part A. So then what question should we ask next? Is this a state requirement? So traditional supplement not supplant requirements preclude Title II Part A funds from being used from the reading academies in the instances where the academies are a state requirement. Therefore, the only instance where the academies may be considered allowable under Title II Part A is if the LEA wants to provide training to non-K through 3 teachers. The House Bill 3 state requirement applies only to principals and K through 3 teachers. Okay, question 2 on our self-check. May migrant education program funds be used to pay for meals and snacks for migratory students on field trips? Remember what your first question should be. What program is involved? In this case, it's the Migrant Education Program. Migrant Education Program follows the traditional presumptions of supplanting. So the response that we have for this deals with several other issues other than supplement, not supplant. In other words, it's the complete answer to this question. If there are no other resources available, migrant education program funds may be used to pay for the costs of food while migratory children are participating in the field trip. The LEA must consider the following when determining if they may use migrant education funds for a particular activity or instruction or support service. The activity or service comports with the results of the state's Comprehensive Needs Assessment, or CNA, and the strategies outlined in the State Service Delivery Plan, or SDP. Migrant education program funds must first be used to meet the identified needs of migratory children that result from their migratory lifestyle and to permit these children to participate effectively in school. The activity or service meets the needs of migratory children that are not addressed by services available from other federal or non-federal programs. And here is the part that is specific to supplement, not supplant. Migrant education program funds are used to supplement rather than supplant the use of state and local funds. In other words, the LEA cannot pay for migrant students with migrant funds and all other students with state and local funds. Okay, here we are on question 3 for your self-check. An LEA wants to use its Title III Part A funds to certify teachers who are on a bilingual exception or ESL waiver. Is this allowable? So what's your first question? What funds are involved? And in this case, it's Title III Part A. So Title III Part A follows the traditional presumptions of supplanting. So your next question should be, is this a state requirement? Title III Part A funds cannot be used to certify teachers who are on a bilingual exception or ESL waiver because such a certification is a state requirement. Title III Part A funds can be used to build the capacity of bilingual and/or ESL certified staff above state requirements. Before doing so, however, the LEA should ensure that no federal, state, or local funds were used to provide this service in the prior year. Let's look now at the documentation that's required for the Title I Part A SNS methodology. It's really important to remember that the Supplement Not Supplant methodology only documents Supplement Not Supplant compliance for Title I Part A and Title I School Improvement. The Supplement Not Supplant requirement in Title I Part A statute says that LEAs shall use federal funds under Title I Part A only to supplement the funds that would, in the absence of such federal funds, be made available from state and local sources for the education of students participating in programs assisted under Title I Part A, and not to supplement those funds. The Title I Part A statute also makes very clear that a local education agency may not be required to identify that an individual cost or service supported with Title I Part A funds is supplemental. Remember what we said earlier about Title I Part A shifting the way we look at Supplement Not Supplant compliance. Title I Part A doesn't look at the activity level anymore. It looks at the allocation of state and local funds to campuses. Once the state and local funds are allocated to campuses according to the Supplement Not Supplant methodology, any Title I Part A funds that campuses receive are considered to be supplemental. Every LEA that accepts Title I Part A or Title I School Improvement funds must document compliance with the SNS requirement by having either a written methodology for allocating its state and local funds, or by having a written statement of exemption from the methodology requirement. Templates for the Supplement Not Supplant methodology as well as the Statement of Exemption, are available in the Supplement Not Supplant Handbook. The primary requirement for the Title I Part A Supplement Not Supplant methodology is that the LEA allocates state and local funds to its campuses without regard to the campus's Title I Part A status. This means that however the LEA decides to distribute its state and local funds to its campuses, the methodology must be Title I Part A neutral. And now we come to what is perhaps the most difficult part of this shift in mindset. The traditional presumptions of supplanting, which we have been accustomed to using for the last 50 to 60 years, do not apply to Title I Part A. Let me say that one more time. The traditional presumptions of supplanting do not apply to Title I Part A under the Every Student Succeeds Act. So what does this do to your list of questions that you're supposed to ask when you're planning? The first question you're always supposed to ask is what program is involved. You should still ask that question first, because you need to know whether you're dealing with Title I Part A or whether you're dealing with a program that follows the traditional presumptions of supplanting. So the first question should still be, what program is involved? If the answer to that question is Title I Part A or Title I School Improvement, then the LEA should ensure that it has either a valid written methodology for distributing its state and local funds to its campuses, or it should have a valid statement of exemption. If this requirement is met, the supplemental nature of the Title I Part A or Title I School Improvement funds is established, and the LEA should then go on to consider the other items on the Title I Part A Use of Funds document. But the question about supplement not supplant should be done. So the methodology talks about campus allocations. What does it mean for funds that are reserved at the LEA level and not distributed to campuses? For Title I Part A, there are assurances in the methodology and in the Statement of Exemption that address funds that are reserved at the LEA level. In its methodology, or in its Statement of Exemption, the LEA must assure that any state and local funds that are retained at the LEA level must be used in a Title I neutral manner. And any Title I Part A funds that are reserved at the LEA level must only be used for Title I Part A purposes, as indicated in the LEA's approved ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application. Okay, it's time for another knowledge check. Is it allowable for Title I Part A funds to be used for the Reading Academies? Remember, what should your first question be? What program is involved? What program is involved? Title I Part A. And so what should you check next? Do you get to ask if this is a state requirement? No, you don't get to ask that question, because Title I Part A doesn't follow the traditional presumptions of supplanting. Let's look at the answer. The LEA meets the supplement not supplant requirement for Title I Part A by having a written methodology for allocating its state and local funds to its campuses, or by having a valid statement of exemption. The LEA does not apply the traditional presumptions of supplanting to Title I Part A activities. The LEA would work through the other items on the Title I Part A Use of Funds one-pager to ensure that the activity is identified in this Comprehensive Needs Assessment, is included in the District Improvement Plan or the Campus Improvement Plan, that the LEA is meeting the EDGAR requirements, and that the activity is aligned with the LEA's policies and procedures. Let's turn briefly now to how the supplement not supplant requirement is monitored. The Federal Fiscal Monitoring Division includes supplement not supplant as part of its monitoring reviews. The Federal Program Compliance Division included the supplement not supplant requirement for Title I Part A as one of the items checked during the random validation process for the 2020-2021 and 2021-2022 school years. The end-of-year compliance report for 2021-2022 included the supplement not supplant requirement as a program compliance self-check item for Title I Part A. This requirement is also subject to future random validations. When auditors are monitoring federal programs with traditional supplement not supplant documentation requirements, they will be applying the presumptions of supplanting. When auditors are monitoring the Title I Part A supplement not supplant requirements, they will be looking for the LEA's written supplement not supplant methodology or statement of exemption. If the LEA is required to have an SNS methodology, the auditors will also be looking for a connection between the state and local allocation amounts generated by the methodology and the amounts actually allocated to campuses in the general ledger. There has been some confusion about what kind of documentation is necessary to connect the supplement not supplant methodology to the general ledger for the LEA. When we are requesting documentation as part of the random validation for the Title I Part A supplement not supplant methodology, we would expect to see the relevant pages of the Campus Budget Activity Report, or its equivalent. The name of the report may be different depending on the LEA's system, but we will look at a sample report in just a minute so that you can see the type of information we will need to make the connection necessary. To make the connection between the campus allocation amounts generated by the LEA's supplement not supplant methodology and the amounts that have actually been allocated to campuses, the report should show the name of the campus and the budget total for fund codes 199 for school districts or 420 for charter schools. For this validation, we only need the pages that have the campus names and totals, not all of the line item expenditures. This is a generic sample page of a campus budget activity report. It has the name of the campus and the total budget, in this case for a charter school, for Fund Code 420. The entire report might have had all of the line item expenditures, but the LEA can pull out and submit only the pages with the campus names and total campus budget amounts for Fund Code 420 for a charter school or 199 for a school district, and submit those pages as part of its supporting documentation to make the connection between the amounts generated by the methodology and the allocations listed in the general ledger. Let's talk now about some of the other common issues that we find when we review the documentation that's submitted for the random validation of the Title I supplement not supplant requirement. The Title I supplement not supplant methodology must allocate state and local funds. One of the issues that we find is that LEAs frequently try to apply the methodology to Title I Part A funds. The Title I Supplement Not Supplant methodology is a Title I Part A requirement, but it's looking at how the LEA allocates its state and local funds. Another common issue is that the traditional presumptions of supplanting do not apply to Title I Part A, but LEAs tend to fall back into that habit. One of the reasons we are encouraging districts to start their planning by asking what program is involved. By verifying this at the beginning, the LEAs can ensure that they are documenting compliance with the Supplement Not Supplant requirement appropriately. A third common issue is that the Title I Part A Supplement Not Supplant methodology does not document compliance for other federal programs. Other federal programs follow the traditional documentation requirements. LEAs tend to conflate the two systems of documentation. And finally, a fourth common issue that we find is that LEAs may claim exemptions that they are not eligible for. They may apply the exemptions incorrectly. In the Supplement Not Supplant Handbook, there are a number of examples of how to apply the Supplement Not Supplant exemptions, and LEAs should refer to those as they are trying to determine whether they are exempt from the Supplement Not Supplant methodology requirement. Okay, we have two more knowledge check questions. We were granted the mentor allotment last year and were able to pay for mentor stipends. This year, we were not granted the allotment, so may we go back to paying the stipends with Title II funds as in previous years? So remember what your first question should be. What programs are involved? In this question, we're talking about Title II Part A funds, but we're also talking about the mentor allotment. The mentor allotment was part of the state allocation. This would be an example of where the LEA would want to keep documentation showing that the state fund source that had been used is no longer available. This could be done through minutes from a board meeting or from a budget report or from the summary of finances. This would be what an auditor would want to see in order for the LEA to successfully rebut the presumptions of supplanting. And this is our last self-check question for this session. Can Title II Part A split fund costs with Title I Part A, since Title I Part A funds can only cover the cost of Title I Part A schools? So what programs are involved? We have Title II Part A and Title I Part A. And since they follow different documentation requirements, the answer may get a little complicated. Let's take each program separately. It would not be a supplanting issue for Title II Part A funds to replace Title I Part A funds, or vice versa, because those statutes only require the federal funds to supplement state and local funds. They're not required to supplement other federal funds. However, the LEA would want to ensure that the individual program requirements were met. For example, the LEA would need to ensure that it could document that Title II Part A funds have been prioritized to meet the needs at the campuses that have been identified for school improvement and campuses that have the highest percentage of low-income students. If Title II Part A funds remain after that, then this could be an allowable activity if it meets with LEA policies and procedures. Title I Part A funds could be used as long as the use of funds requirement for Title I Part A funds are met. For example, identifying this is a need in the comprehensive needs assessment, that the activity is included in the LEA or campus plan, that it's in line with the EDGAR requirements and local policies. If these are Title I Part A funds that have been reserved at the LEA level, they would need to be used in accordance with the activities approved in the LEA's consolidated federal grant application. Questions related to supplement non-supplant may be directed to vivian.smurl@tea.texas.gov or to the division's email address at essasupport@tea.texas.gov. We do our best to respond to your calls and emails within 48 hours. We're always looking for questions to add to our frequently asked questions document. Another important resource for LEAs is the program staff at your Regional Education Service Center. We train the Education Service Center staff in the program requirements as we develop the training for LEAs, so they are a good place to start when you have questions. They are familiar with the frequently asked questions documents and web resources, and they can often help you with answers to your questions more quickly than waiting for a return call or email from us.